Now, the next eyewitness account he gives is the burning of a bridge on a railroad bridge trestle that's on the Osceola River, which led up to the Battle of the Natural Bridge, which he also participated in. The following is more of his eyewitness accounts from his memoirs. Now, keep in mind as we read this that these are the events that led up to the death by firing squad of two Taylor County residents, William Wilson Strickland and John Brannon, which Mr. Hankins was also a witness to these events. He was actually there and watched the firing squad that took the lives of those two men that day. As we read his memoirs, Mr. Hankins was actually a passenger aboard this train on the Osceola crossing. The next morning, we got orders to march at once to the nearest point on the railroad to get transportation to Tallahassee to join the balance of our regiment and other troops. We were to try and keep the Yanks from destroying the capital of our state. We were put under a forced march, not stopping but a few minutes at a time all day until about 12 o'clock that night, when we reached Station 5 at Greenville. We did not have to wait long for a train. Everything piled on and started for Tallahassee. Everything went well until just as day began to dawn. We were going down the grade and around the curve. The engineer called for a break with a loud whistle from the locomotive. Then he began to blow distress whistles as fast as he could. There was not enough brakes to check his speed. He found he could not stop, so he put on all the power his engine had and landed us all okay across the burning bridge on the Osceola River. Some of the bridge fell in as the last car got off of it. We went on to the next station and put Dr. Treadwell and his dogs. He had a pack of train hounds for running deserters. About 10 men on horses went with him back to the bridge. He put his dogs on the trail and soon had the deserters surrounded in a small cypress pond. There were 5 of them in their blue uniforms. 3 of them were killed and 2 were captured and put in prison in Tallahassee. The 2 men they captured that day were William W. Strickland and John Brannon of Taylor County. These events happened in March of 1865. Now, in his writings, Mr. Hankins then goes on to describe moving further on down the track and engaging in what would historically become known as the Battle of the Natural Bridge, in an attempt to prevent Union forces from making it to the capital in Tallahassee. Now, he describes that in his writings in vivid detail. He was involved in that. But you can look that up at the Florida Memory. I'm going to try to remember to post a link to his memoirs in the comment section down bottom. But he goes into very great detail. After that, he writes about going to Tallahassee and being a witness to the execution of William W. Strickland and John Brannon. The following is straight out of his memoirs as written by him. We went back to Tallahassee and struck camp again for some time. While we were there, the 2 men that were caught during the Osceola Bridge were condemned to be shot. Their names were John Brannon and William W. Strickland. I was drawn in the lot that was to shoot those, and also an old man named Phillips. We begged so hard to get out of it until the captain agreed that if anyone would volunteer, he would let us off. So the next morning at roll call, he said, "Men, I have got to have 2 men from my company to shoot those 2 deserters at 10 o'clock today. Now, if any of you want to volunteer to do it, step 3 steps in front." To my great relief, out stepped 4 men, 2 boys and 2 old men. He took the 2 old men, Duncan Grinstead and W.F. Rowan. At 9 o'clock, the troop was all formed in line and marched out to a high hill right south of the Capitol. It was about a half-mile south of the railroad shops. We were put in a line on 3 sides of the stakes into what was called a hollow square. The stakes that the men were tied to stood about 20 feet apart. They were green pine saplings about 6 inches through and about 10 feet long. They were put in the ground good and strong. We did not wait too long before a guard arrived with the condemned men, who were dressed in the full Yankee blue uniforms. The major in command read their death sentence. They were then taken to the stakes, their hands crossed behind them and around the stakes. then one rope around their bodies and around the stakes. They were then blindfolded. The guard that was to shoot them was in a line about 100 feet from them in front. After blindfolding them, the officer that brought the prisoners and tied the blindfolds to them marched in line to the other guards that was to execute the prisoners. The officers saluted the other officers in charge. "The prisoners are in your charge. Do your duty, men." Lieutenant Blackwell, in charge of the guard, gave the command. "Attention guards, carry arms, forward, march. Halt. Right dress, ready, aim, fire." It sounded like one gun, one hollow, a cloud of smoke, and one of the men hollered, "Oh Lord." The bullets cut the rope that held one of them, and he fell and rolled over on his back. The other man, I think, stood perfectly rigid for 5 or 6 seconds before he moved. Then his head dropped over and he hung in a lifeless heap until cut loose. Before he ever joined the service, in his memoirs he describes when he was about 14 and 15 years old, Major Canfield, leading campaigns around Taylor County and Lafayette, Jefferson, and Steinhatchee, burning the homes of a lot of innocent people. If your people wasn't serving in the Confederacy, he burnt your homes and took your belongings and imprisoned women and children. He describes that in vivid detail.